afternoon, or I suppose it's exactly noon. So good day, everyone. Dylan and myself will be presenting this webinar. And this is going to cover the Cloud CAD within 3DEXPERIENCE, but we'll dive into that in a second. And now, before we start, I'd just like to let you know who we are. So you've probably seen me on a bunch of the webinars if you've attended any of our previous ones. I'm Ivan, and I am the product manager at CAD Systems, as well as my colleague here.
Hi guys, I'm Dylan. I'm an application engineer here at CAD. I've been here for a little while now.
So between the two of us, we'll try and show you everything that is there within 3DEXPERIENCE in the Cloud CAD. Now, before we dive too deep, I always have to do the usual spiel of 3DEXPERIENCE. But before I start that, if you guys are SOLIDWORKS users, don't fret and don't be afraid. We are going to show you things that are even applicable to you, even if you're not looking to move to a new CAD system. There's tools here that even play very well with SOLIDWORKS that add extra capabilities on top of SOLIDWORKS. Specifically, Dylan will show you some of those tools, and I'll, if we have time at the end, show you one really cool tool that one of our customers is already using. Now, 3DEXPERIENCE, and I'm going to try and keep this brief, is a very big product or platform. And essentially what it is it's a toolbox of tools that you can use to bolt onto your company, onto your systems, to try and expand what you can do. So we call it the 3DEXPERIENCE platform. And when we say platform, it's a very difficult term to try and describe, but I like to use the analogy of what we have with things like iPhone or Amazon or Microsoft. If you are in the Microsoft platform, you're using Microsoft Teams, you're using Office, you're using Outlook. All of these tools play really well with each other. You know, I can, in a Teams meeting, directly link the Word file I have and have someone else edit it at the same time as I edit it. And 3DEXPERIENCE is this exact same concept, this idea that we have separate tools that we are linking with one platform to make these experience seamless. And what's nice about 3DEXPERIENCE is it's engineering focused and manufacturing and design focused. Now, enough about platform in general. I just want to go through some of the benefits of the Cloud CAD before we show you guys some examples regarding 3DEXPERIENCE specifically. So one of the main benefits of the Cloud CAD and of Cloud CAD in general is there's absolutely no hardware requirements. So you don't need a big beefy laptop or desktop to try and run CAD systems. All of it is entirely in the cloud. All of the processing is done in the cloud. So you could use pretty much anything to perform CAD. So that it reduces that hardware overhead and that IT overhead on that front. Because of the no hardware requirement, it actually is fully browser-based. So it can run on any operating system with a supported browser. So be that a Mac, a Windows PC, an iPad, an Android phone, an iPhone, pretty much anything is supported, a Chromebook, as long as it's one of the main supported browsers, which is Firefox, Chrome, Edge, and Safari. It'll run on anything. And that's what makes it so powerful. It's expanding CAD to more and more users and more systems. Because it's linked to the 3DEXPERIENCE, all of the files are always backed up and revisioned, etc., because it has a linked PLM system. Now, we call this PLM system turnkey because that's all you need to do to start using it. You just need to turn the key to start it. There's no setup required. Now, obviously, you can customize it to your liking, but as it comes out of the box, you can just start using it directly to revision your files, back up your files, do approvals, and so forth. The cloud or the Cloud CAD is fully touch enabled as well, and it adapts to your screen size. So if you use an iPhone, it'll actually work. You know, you can do CAD on an iPhone. The screen is a little bit small, but it adapts very well even to small screens. So don't be worried that you're going to be stuck still at a desktop, even if it's a Chromebook or something. You can still use something like an iPad to do CAD on a regular basis. And lastly, and most importantly, all of these tools are SOLIDWORKS compatible. So we can pull in designs from SOLIDWORKS and vice versa, and design parts on either side, make modifications on either side, and make sure that we don't have a disjointed system of different CAD tools that can all work together a lot more seamlessly than you would with separate CAD tools. Now, I'm going to start off by just working on general CAD and showing you guys some examples there. We'll move on to some of the other tools like sheet metal, subdivision modeling, etc. But before I start this, just a note, we are showing separate tools and separate apps, and that's what we call them. We call them apps. But think of them more like the tabs in SolidWorks. They are completely seamless. You can switch between apps. I can take a design I've made in XDesign and switch it over to the sheet metal app and vice versa. And Dylan will show you how to do that switching. So you don't have to worry about, they're separate apps. How am I going to get the designs across? It's virtually seamless. Now, let's dive into the normal CAD side of things. So I have a SolidWorks design here, and what I've done is I've already uploaded some of the parts of this. So I'm just going to finalize everything and upload this model into 3DEXPERIENCE. So as you can see, it's a Jeep. It does say Toyota on the front, or Land Cruiser, and it does say Toyota on the front. So I'm just going to quickly lock this to myself and save it into 3DEXPERIENCE. Let me just skip ahead here a bit. Go. Sorry about that. There we go. So let me show you. So saving it for the final time to platform. Apologies. I don't want to show you guys the SolidWorks side because you guys are already familiar with SolidWorks. There's no need to do that. So if I've saved it to the platform, and that's just done by right-clicking, pressing save, I can then go to my browser side and open up the design directly within there. Now, in this particular case, we actually want to design a brand new bumper for this part. So we're going to create a new part and call that bull bar and save that to the webinar location on the platform. Now, I'm just going to quickly generate the file. While we're doing that, we're going to have a look at the bookmarks we have on the site. Now, bookmarks are just folders where we store our designs. So we can just drag one of the SolidWorks designs directly from there and add it into our part. And the reason we want to do this, we actually want to reference this, the old design of the bull bar, for our new one. And you'll see why in a second. So the whole frame, everything has been placed in one design, the bull bar, the frame itself, etc. But we want to isolate out that bull bar. So we're just going to maximize our view. So we're looking at the a full screen CAD interface. And you'll see there's a little red icon on those files that says SolidWorks. So we actually know we're actually referencing the SolidWorks file directly. I'm going to hide these designs, and we're going to focus on this bull bar over here. Now, this is the initial design. It's pretty good. It's actually very nice, but there are some improvements we could make. We're not entirely sure how. What we're going to do is we're going to trace out the shape. And we could also use convert entities, but I want to show you guys some of the sketching tools and show you how similar this tool is to SolidWorks. Many of the icons are almost exactly the same. You'll notice I've just sped this up a little bit just to save time. But in terms of sketching capabilities and features, these tools have been made to match SolidWorks as closely as possible to try and avoid that learning curve that you would have with normal CAD. We finished that design up, tracing that out, and now we're going to extrude this shape. Now, similar to SolidWorks, we have the interactive 3D design tools, so we can just take the extrude and modify it slightly. Perhaps we want to look at a different view of this and make sure it's exactly the correct thickness based on the original design. We're quite happy with that, and we're going to press OK. Now, there was a sneak preview there of something called a super feature, something we mentioned in one of our previous webinars. I'll talk about that in a second. Now, we've finished this up, but we want to actually redesign this, and we're going to use a tool called Design Guidance. Now, this is not something you have within SolidWorks. It's actually extremely powerful. So we select two fixed faces, and then we place a human, maybe they're sitting on the bull bar there at the top, and saying, okay, let's look at this and generate a shape for me, a brand new design based on the inputs I've given you. So it's going to run through a few iterations. It's going to try and spit out a design for us that uses weight but still is able to resist the force. And what's nice about the system is we can actually adjust the weight reduction and the shaping of this. You'll see we have a sort of dip in the middle with a narrowing at the ends as well. So quite a bit different from our original design. Now, the problem with these tools often is what they do, they give you a design that's very hard to manufacture. It requires 3D printing or some fancy 5-axis machining. So what we're going to do, we're going to use this as the basis to inspire our new design. So drawing on the front plane, we're just going to put in a line for symmetry. And we're going to trace out the shape, giving a little bit of padding just to increase strength beyond what they've given us. And we're going to cut that away from the original design. Now again, same tools as we have in SOLIDWORKS. Select the symmetry plane, select the lines we want to mirror, and there we go. We can then select the central line and extrude cut this through the entire design. Now, something I want to show you, when I select the extrude cut, you'll notice there's a list of features there: add, new, extrude, thin surface. And this is something cool with 3DEXPERIENCE SOLIDWORKS. We can easily switch the same feature between whether it's an additive extrude, whether it's a surface extrude, or whether it's a cut. And we can do that after the fact. So perhaps we accidentally added material or select the wrong feature. We could easily make that change within our tool without breaking our entire feature tree. And that extends a bit further. I'll talk about that near the end of the webinar. And there we have the outline of our design. We've obviously reduced some weight, and we're just going to make it not transparent anymore. But there are some basic issues with this design. For one, it's completely solid. Now, while that might be fine if this was a much smaller part, trying to manufacture something this solid and this big would need casting or some very expensive machining. So instead, what we're going to do, we're just quickly going to save it, and we're going to delete the SOLIDWORKS part from our design because we don't need it. It was just a reference. Take this a step further. So as you'll notice, all the tools there at the bottom, whether that's revolves, extrudes, all of those sweeps, anything like that. And we're going to take this design and we're going to shell it to simulate a sort of sheet metal part that has been formed. Now, we have the shell command, and we're just going to select all the faces that we want to remove and give it the thickness we want. Now, similar to SOLIDWORKS, it gives us a preview, and we can easily switch between a one-way shell, a both-way shell, turn on tangent propagation, or if we just want to shell the body, make a completely hollow solid, perhaps like a tank, we could also do that within this tool. Select a thickness of 2 millimeters and press OK. Let's go generate the shape, and there we are. Very similar to our original design, but with the improvements we got from the design guidance applied to it. Now, obviously, this was designed in XDesign, so we need to get this back into our SOLIDWORKS assembly that we had. And because of the interactivity between these items, all we have to do is pull it over to SOLIDWORKS, and we can easily do that. Now, first steps first, we need to get rid of the old bull bar. And because that was designed in the frame itself, we actually need to edit the frame itself and delete that out. Now, it's just quickly downloading the part we've just made. And what's nice is if we make a change for the part on XDesign, it'll pull through into SOLIDWORKS. There is that bi-directionality to the design. Bring up the frame, like I mentioned. Go in and get rid of this front portion. Just simply selecting it, we see it's a boss extrude. So in this particular case, we're going to suppress it. Luckily, the way this has been designed, it doesn't break anything further in our feature tree. And we can just go ahead and switch back to our assembly, and it will update the design. Now, one thing to keep in mind, because 3DEXPERIENCE has a PLM system backing it. We just have to make sure we interact with that in the correct way. So we're locking this file, saying that we are the person editing this file at the moment, so that if we have other users working on this design, we're not having conflicting design changes being saved. Go ahead and save it, and then switch back to the assembly to update this design. If you should be familiar with this pop-up, so we can just go ahead and press next or yes, and it'll update the design for us. You'll see it's updated. We've removed the old toolbar there from the front. So again, we'll just insert the new one. And what's nice is we could even use a drag and drop directly from 3DEXPERIENCE to pull this in. We don't have to open the part first and insert it. 3DEXPERIENCE allows direct drag and drop from the web browser in order to open parts. Now, as we finish this off, we're just going to mate this in place. And I'd like to emphasize as we do this, we're using two completely different CAD tools, but they interact together so well with each other. We don't have to worry about things like converting files to step files or anything like that. All of that stuff is needless and not required with this tool or with XDesign and these Cloud CAD tools. And keep that in mind as we go through the different examples. I'm obviously showing this with XDesign, but this applies to any of the other tools we will be showing. I'm just going to mate that in place to that midpoint there at the top, and our design is finalized. Not you, but I think that looks pretty spiffy, so we can just go ahead and save this design back to 3DEXPERIENCE. And the reason why we're saving it, so that when Dylan goes ahead with his portion, he actually has the newest and latest up-to-date design, so that we can collaborate on 3DEXPERIENCE. Even though all we're doing is designing on our own, we're working on the same design at the same time. So I could make changes, save designs, and he can just open them up on his side and have the changes reflect through. So like I said earlier, we just need to lock the files to us. Then save those particular files. It even highlights the files we've changed. So we can see the sub-assembly as well as the frame have been changed and the top-level assembly. So it'll let you know these specific items have changed. And the nice thing is, because it has a local cache of files, it'll only download and upload the files that have changed. There's no need to go through and download and upload the whole assembly every single time a change is made. That makes the download and upload faster, as well as makes it easier to make design changes. Maybe you're losing power, maybe ESCOM shut off the power and your internet's down. You'll still be able to continue working because you have that local cache of files. So there's no need to worry about lack of connection to the internet to use these tools. And there we go. Everything's been saved. So I'm just going to unlock it so Dylan can go ahead with his design changes. And there we go. Now, Dylan is going to show us some tools like subdivision modeling on his side. So I'm going to turn off my camera and microphone and have him jump into these tools. I'm just going to let him take over the screen share.
Thank you, Efan. I appreciate it. You just let me know when you can see my screen there.
Still loading, and there we go.
So, perfect. Let's jump right into it. So before we get going, I just want to explain one or two things. So we're going to take a look first at the X shape or the subdivision modeling within 3DEXPERIENCE. Now, one thing you're going to notice if you just look at the right-hand side of the screen right there is that the Land Cruiser, the J40-001 file actually is locked at the moment at the time that I was doing it. So edits were in place or were happening while I was doing this. Why I'm letting us know this is because let's take a look at what I'm going to do. But what I'm showing is even if someone is editing a file, you still have access to those files for referencing or other purposes. So let's jump right into it. So the first step is to create a new component. So I'm going to say new component and give this file a name. Let's call it X shape or shape. And again, it's going to be saved to my webinar location. Once it's created a file, I can quite seamlessly drag and drop in the main assembly. Now, even though it is locked and it's being used to edit, I can still, as I said, use it for referencing. So I've inserted it. Let's just full screen this view. And we're going to see that because the file is being edited, when I zoom out slightly, it looks like some components are missing. So a few components are missing here. So all I have to do is just expand the view of the file, find the missing or hidden component, and I can still unhide it again, all for reference or for whatever else I need it for. Let's go back and minimize this and orientate our model so that we can get started with the X shape. So what X shape is, it's kind of like a free form design tool. So I'm going to insert a block here, give it a certain number of subdivisions. I'm going to go 4 all around. And then there's this option for crease edges. Now I'm going to turn that off and show you that it could be rounded or it could be square. Now I want this square for this version of the model, and I'm going to reorientate this block to put it roughly where it would be in the assembly. Now this is not creating a part in the assembly. It's using the assembly as a reference to create this part, which I could then go and mate into place in an assembly at a later stage if I needed to. So at this stage right now, we're just going to take this block, again, reorientate the model a little bit, and expand the block till it fits over these bars at the back. This way I can then start designing what I would like this shape to be. So right now it's quite basic, just a square. But even more so, because of the tools we're going to use being push and pull and very dynamic modeling tools, I would like to have symmetry. So by turning on the symmetry option, it creates a nice symmetrical plane. Now I'm going to use the crease tool to crease the edges to get it to a rounded face. So as you can see, now that I'm creasing the left-hand side, it's automatically creasing the right because of that symmetry tool. So even though this is a slightly simple design, I could have a more complex, more round, more square. And if I go to somewhere in the center, you'll see it'll be half round, half squarish. Again, you can get very, very interesting shapes from this tool. So now that I've got my creased edges, let's do some dynamic pushing and pulling. But first, we're going to make some extrudes. So I'm going to add material to the side. As you can see though, because I'm adding it to the left, it is also automatically going to add to the right-hand side because of my use of the symmetry tool. So we've added in these extra bit of materials to the side of our object. And this is looking a bit bulky, so I'm going to slim this down. So I need to select these faces and then just use these points to push or pull the material into the shape or size that I would like. Again, I'm not using anything too specific, not exactly 10 moles or something. I'm pushing it to what I think will look best, and then I can always come back to edit the model afterwards. Right now, I'm trying to add in additional mesh segments. So this is how you could add more segments for even more control with your design. So by adding a segment over here at this line, intersecting at this line, I will have more control over what I can push and pull in this specific part of the model. So now that I've got these extra segments, you could see here, if I was to just twist or pull it, I could twist just that small piece of material. So let's select both of these faces and make some minor changes by just pushing and pulling our geometry to get a slightly better feel and look to that part. So that's all I'm doing right here, is just changing the feel of the part and adding in these side pieces to my model. Next up, I can see that there's a bar that's sticking out there on the bottom left. And if I took a look here on this side, again, I can push and pull this material to fit the frame of, whatever I'm modeling. And this will then allow me to dynamically change what I'm doing with reference to an assembly or anything. At any given point, keep in mind, I could have made this assembly transparent. So again, let's just go and make a few more push and pulls to fit the frame or the edges so that when I bring it into my assembly, it does roughly fit onto what I would like and have a slightly better feel to it. In this case, you could have, as I said, made the assembly transparent and seen further into it. So let's select everything. You can also move this entire model by grab handles, very easy to use up and down, and also increase the size of it, again, just by those grab handles. So if I go and select this entire piece of block again, you can see it doesn't select the assembly, but I can make this smaller so that it's not too high up or it isn't going to be too top heavy. Last slight movement changes to make sure that it is sitting on top of that frame and not inside of it. And that should be good enough. Next up, we're going to take a look at solving this and then adding basic features. So I'm going to say, okay, it's going to solve this and create that part. And now I can go and use normal features as I would in SOLIDWORKS. So as Irfan showed us earlier, we're going to use this shell feature. And I can remove these segment faces and shell this to add these two windows. So let's say we add a window at the top and a window at the back. And it's going to shell to 1 millimeter. Something that is also really cool to take note of is the fact that you can edit a shell feature or any other feature quite easily by right-clicking on the shell feature and just saying edit feature like I would have in my SOLIDWORKS application. They've tried to keep as many of these core the functions the same so that users can jump from one application to the next as seamlessly as possible. So we've taken a look, we changed our design to have a 3 mil shell so we have a little bit more body to it. And now let's look at some more subdivision modeling. I can use the subdivision tool on the right to isolate selected faces so that only those faces will be what I want to edit. So now these other faces all the way around won't be editable. I can only push and pull these 4 blocks of subdivisions so that I can just divide up or isolate specific areas that I want to model. So I've just sped that up a little bit. And now that I'm done, I can go back to my model, I can solve the feature, and then all the previous features will once again knit together and display. So this is the core idea for the subdivision modeling. Now, in the next thing I'm going to show, which is going to be my sheet metal, we're going to see at the end of this how we can take a part and how easy it would be, as Irfan said, to change it from one app or application to the next. So let's go and take a look.
Dylan,
yeah.
I just want to mention a few things about the subdivision modeling, because normally people that do any type of carbon fiber layup or fiberglass or mold design, making those types of organic and curving shapes is extremely difficult. What Dylan just did there would have probably been quite a few hours in surface modeling in SOLIDWORKS, and then changing it in the way he did would have been at least an hour more just to have everything update, hoping that the feature tree doesn't break. So the subdivision modeling tools directly integrate with SOLIDWORKS. In this case, Dylan just added that onto an existing SOLIDWORKS assembly, but he could have easily used the SOLIDWORKS assembly to do a cavity tool or use the subdivision model to cut away into a SOLIDWORKS part. There's full design operability with SOLIDWORKS, and you shouldn't see these as new and different tools, but add-ins you can add into your SOLIDWORKS. Yes, you access them via a browser, but that's pretty much the only difference from a normal SOLIDWORKS add-in.
Perfect. That's exactly right. Thanks again, Irfan. But yeah, they're not new tools or anything like that. It's just additional tools that you can use to improve what is already there and improve on that, make these things more efficient and a lot more accessible to all users as well. You don't need to spend hours on hours learning about surface modeling just to get a very tiny amount of work done, where the subdivision modeling in 3DEXPERIENCE is a surfacing tool that is very easy for anyone to pick up and use. And they do directly translate back to SOLIDWORKS into SOLIDWORKS because of that surface modeling. Great. So I'm going to get started on this sheet metal. So let's dive right into it. Unless Irfan, you have anything else to add to that?
No, I think that's perfect, Dylan.
Perfect. So let's jump right into the sheet metal. So we're going to start off by creating, again, a new component. I just select new component, give my component a name, let's call it sheet metal. And then there's this location again. So just to quickly, briefly speak about this location or what it is, it's your different areas in which you can save, or different workspaces in the Cloud CAD where you can save your models to. You can have different groups, different teams, all that kind of stuff, and you can create those kinds of things. And I'm sure Irfan will elaborate on that a little bit later, hopefully. But let's start off with sketch. So I select a plane, and I'm going to use the basic sketching tools that we all know and love. But some cool improvements is I could just type in 50, and this sketch will be locked to that 50. I could also go and draw a sketch or use this S key, as you saw that little pop up on the right. For any of those SOLIDWORKS users out there, your shortcuts like the S key and other things, and those are customizable, are still available. So you'll see here, I'm going to press S, I go to my line tool, and I can draw a line any length. You also don't have to do this by typing in 50 and locking a line to it. You can just add a dimension as you would have in SOLIDWORKS and dimension it after the fact. Maybe you get a design change or something like that. I'm going to go ahead and just move this dimension over, and then I'm going to start off my sheet metal tools. So to start off, I'm going to start off with a basic flange extrude. So I select my sketch. It's first going to ask me for your sheet metal parameters, just as it would in SOLIDWORKS. So I select the thickness and the bend radius. I take a look at the bend calculation or any other relief types that you might want to change. There are quite a few here. And you can go through all of these tools as well. But in this sheet metal, I'm going to now select my extrusion. So for your fixed geometry, if I selected this edge in the sketch, because I haven't actually got any geometry yet, or it's just a sketch, it needs to first extrude before I give it fixed geometry. Otherwise, it's going to give this kind of an error. What's cool about the 3DEXPERIENCE is, even though there's an error, unlike with other applications sometimes, it still finds the best possible solution for you. However, in this case, as you saw, I didn't want it to flatten from the left-hand side. So I'm going to go back in, change the fixed geometry now that I have some, and now when I flatten, it's going to flatten as I want it to from that fixed face. Next up, we're going to add an edge flange to the back here. So we select this back edge, we give it a height, we give it whatever other settings that we would want for this edge flange, and we say OK. Some of the other tools that are available for sheet metal are still available here as well. And if I click here, you can see I've got my flange or my hem, your teardrop and user flanges. But let's create a basic hem just to show that it's still the same seamless features. I give it a length, let's say 10 millimeters here. And we say OK. And it's going to again add a hem feature into this sheet metal part. Next up is adding cuts. Now, cuts are as basic as adding a sketch. So we're going to create a square sketch somewhere on this model, and then we're going to add a cut. Now, in the sheet metal tool, there is this nice pocket and cut through tool. So you can do a cutout, or I could have done a pocket, as you can see here. But in this case, I'm going to just link to thickness, keep that setting on, and then say OK. And it just does a nice, neat cutout that links to my sheet metal thickness. Some cool tools here. If I was to add a corner to this small edge here, I can use something in 3DEXPERIENCE called the Design Assistant that you see right here and select all similar tools. Now, a little bit later after this, Irfan's going to explain a bit more about this Design Assistant. But in this case, I'm going to just take out some of these edges, as I don't want to use all of them. Take out 6 and 5 as well, and just do these 4 edges and say OK. There are other options for that as well, where it wouldn't have selected everything, but that's just for showing. Now I can go and flatten this part, and a cool tool as well is I can export this straight from 3DEXPERIENCE from the sheet metal app directly to DXF. So I go and I give my file a name. I'm going to call it sheet metal. I could save it to my 3D space, or I could save this DXF straight onto my hard disk. I could give all of these settings or change them however I need, and then I could say save or cancel. And now one of the cool things is if I needed to take the sheet metal part into another app, all I had to do is press the X button on my keyboard and it comes up with which apps I would want to switch to. So I could change it into any one of these, into X shape or X frame or something, and make additional changes straight there as needed. So guys, as for how a part like this can be seamlessly changed, it is as simple as double clicking on that app and it would then open up the next app. And yeah, Irfan, you had something to say, sorry.
Yes, thank you so much, Dylan. So as you guys can see, like we showed the normal CAD tools, we still have all the sheet metal tools that we can integrate within 3DEXPERIENCE. And these are, like I said, can operate with SolidWorks. So it's not an either or thing. It's a, bi-directional interface we can use. I don't know if you have a few final comments, Dylan, before I jump onto some of the other tools.
No, that's all from me. So thank you so much, guys. I'm going to jump off right here.
Okay, let me just share my screen, guys. Okay, so we've shown you the normal CAD, we've shown you the cool subdivision modeling, which is one of the features that you can add onto your SolidWorks, something that you can't really do in SolidWorks at the moment. But let's go over some of the standards, just so I can show you that these tools are also still within 3DEXPERIENCE. One of them is Weldments, and specifically, you guys are probably used to Weldments and structure systems, and the same tools exist within 3DEXPERIENCE. So I could go ahead, select the sketches I've made for the handrail, and just have it generate the weldment profiles for those. This is a quick video, so you can see we can even make things like our own custom profiles and use them within our existing designs as well. Switching from a fixed library to one of our custom items. And even something like this race car chassis, you'll see we're selecting a few edges, and it's actually going to auto-select the rest of the edges with that design assistant Dylan was talking about. I'm going to dive into that a bit later. And this is actually one of my favorite features. We can take that design and change the background and directly see a very well-rendered image without resorting to tools like Visualize. We can still get a very good proof of concept, change the background, have shadows and floors, etc. You'll also see an entire cut list is generated from this, so we can still export our cut list as we would normally from SolidWorks for procurement, ordering, or anything like that. Again, if you guys have any questions, please just pop the questions into the chat. That's it for the Weldment side. The molds, one of the powerful tools within SolidWorks. So I'm just going to show you guys an example of how we take a mold from start to finish. And this is done with the tool called 3D Mold Creator. So like we've mentioned, you can easily switch between these tools. It's pretty seamless, like switching between tabs in SolidWorks. And we have our drill chassis here. And we're going to start by specifying the pull direction. And it's going to give us a draft analysis just to show, hey, you might need to worry about these faces. They might not be able to extract from the mold. Now, it'll auto-create the pull line, and then you can manually create it just as you would in SolidWorks. Perhaps there's some issue with the auto-creation. Same with the shut-off and parting surfaces. Again, you can auto-create them, or you can do some manual creation if there are some areas that are not turning out exactly like you want. Taking that a step further, we can do our parting surface. And from there, it's as simple as then just generating your core and cavity for this mold. Now, mold design generally, like this portion is fairly straightforward. And you'll see even with tools like 3DEXPERIENCE, they don't differ in any meaningful way from SolidWorks. The tools are very similar. And there we have our core and cavity. Now, obviously the video, there's some cuts and skips in there, but generating this would take no more than 5 to 10 minutes. And this is the same set of tools, the same features, even the same icons and keyboard shortcuts as you would have in SolidWorks. Now, that covers some of the different tools. Like we said, we have structures, sheet metal, normal CAD, subdivision modeling, as well as mold design. Now, before I dive into one of the final features, which is one of my favorite, I actually want to show you some of the general features of all the Cloud CAD tools. And we call these power features. Now, forgive the name, but they are really, really powerful, and they are tools that put them actually a step above even SolidWorks itself. While these tools are these cloud tools are fairly new, because of that, they're able to implement these new features. So one of them is design guidance, which I showed you in the beginning. Another one is feature parking, which I will show you shortly. Super features, which I briefly touched on, but I will show you an exact example of that. Design assistance, which we showed, but I haven't entirely explained really how powerful this tool is. We actually did this in one of our previous webinars. And lastly, flexible assembly design, which I'm not going to cover today, but we'll maybe cover in a future webinar. Now, before I dive into these, let me firstly show you, I'm going to switch to my browser here, and I'm going to talk a bit about the feature parking and the super features. Now, super features is a bit of a odd name, but let me just explain what that means. Now, earlier you saw when we edit a feature, we had this list of features where we can switch it from a cut to an extrude. Perhaps we wanted to add material to this instead of taking it away. Perhaps we wanted to do a thin extrude. We wanted to make a slot in this design, or maybe we want to do some surface modeling, anything like that. Now, that's only the first portion of the super features. If we take this a step further, we can actually switch between revolves and sweeps and normal extrudes directly from within the design tree. So I could go to revolve. I say I want to do a solid revolve, and I want to cut away material around this axis here. Now, it's not too happy with this because I have not given it closed geometry. So instead, I actually want to mold in a slot with the sweep feature. So you'll see it has already pre-selected the lines. Let me just clear this so I can make sure it selects the right ones. But there's a little problem here. I actually don't have a profile, and I haven't drawn one, so this is a bit of a problem for me. And this is where one of the other features come in called feature parking. Now in SolidWorks, you can create a sketch and directly from that hit extrude or hit cut and it'll cut. But within 3DEXPERIENCE, we can take that a step further. We actually have feature parking where I can hit these three dots here and say create, insert sketch. This is going to create a brand new feature where I can quickly draw the profile I want. So in my particular case, I just want a little circle because I want an O-ring slot for this. I'm going to make this, let's say 5 mils, hit OK. And it's going to quickly generate that, push that over to the sweep feature for us. Without having to delete the feature, redo it, adding in, exiting the feature to redo a sketch, we can directly from that interface create our new sketch feature. We just select our profile, then just sweep that along the particular path. So let me just select my sweep path here. And we can cut a channel directly within this interface. Now, what I actually want to focus on is go back to the design assistant and talk a bit more about that. Dylan showed you it almost as a smart selection tool. What Design Assistant actually is, it's a tool specifically for, it's an AI-based machine learning tool that helps with selection of items and helps propagate features. Those menial tasks where you have to select multiple edges over and over again, Design Assistant helps with that. Let me show you guys a few examples from our previous webinar that we used. Now, in this particular case, the first example, we have a gear that we want to add some fillets to. Now, this gear has almost hundreds and hundreds of edges we have to select. So we're just going to quickly edit the gear, select one of those edges, and a fillet to that. Now, when we select the edge, you'll see we're just adding a small 0.1 radius fillet. Hit that little pop-up next to the selection for the Design Assistant. Clicking on that has the Design Assistant auto-calculate the selection, and it gives you a suggestion. You can actually press that gear icon and customize the suggestion if it's not exactly what you're looking for. Now, in this particular case, it's really hit the nail on the head. It's spot on. So what we're going to do is we're just going to press OK, and it's going to fill all of those within the feature. Then we can just press OK and fillets that might have taken quite a long time to try and select all those edges are now auto-selected for us. You might be thinking, okay, there's a sort of similar feature in SolidWorks. We could probably still do that without an issue. So let me show you my favorite example. And this is specifically for sketch propagation. We have a block here, and we want to cut holes into this block, into specific corners. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to draw the circle that I want to cut into this block. There near the corner. And place that down. Now with Design Assistant, you'll see it propagates this to all of the similar edges in this model. And this is exactly what I wanted. And this is something like try and show me any other CAD tool that does this. This AI-based suggestion tool is really powerful. And because we can customize the suggestion, we're not just stuck with it spitting answers at us. You can say, okay, exclude these edges, etc. Now, those both were sort of just selection examples. Let me show you this propagated more towards the mating side of things. Now, we have a part here, a gear, that we need to propagate throughout this design. This is a planetary gear system. So we're going to select the item. And from the drop-down, there's a button, Design Assistance with Mate Creation. What it's going to do is it's going to look at where the part's currently mated and look for similar edges in the design. Now, luckily for us, it's auto-selected these two top edges that we can use in our design. But we actually also want to propagate this to the bottom edges. So what we can do, we can actually go ahead and tell it to select different edges. So you'll see there we have the suggestion box, just re-adding that one. Now, if you want to add one of these back ones, we just select an edge there as well. And it realizes that edge is similar to two other edges as well. And it's going to make the suggestion, let's propagate this to those two edges as well. Some really powerful AI-based suggestion tools that could save you time in the long run with your design. And there we go, placed and everything mated in place. Now, these are just some of the new features brought into these cloud-based CAD apps. And this is just some things that we can only add because we're starting with a fresh code base. We're still keeping that link with desktop SolidWorks. We're still keeping a hand on, how SolidWorks and how CAD has been happening for decades, but we are starting to give you tools that you can move to or perhaps just add to your existing workflows. Now, the next one, this is an example from one of our customers, iAbove. They're specifically focused on designing and making anti-poaching drones. And in this particular example, we've worked with them in designing this particular wing. So I'd just like to show this to you guys. Now, this is a cool tool called Generative Design. And what this tool does is you can give it, essentially, you tell it, listen, I need you to make a pattern or take a certain feature and create an extremely complex pattern for me. And you'll see I'm just hiding some of the designs here. I need you to take this and give me that pattern, apply it to pretty much any shape or surface. Now, the nice thing about this tool is you only have to design that pattern once, and you can apply it again and again to different wing shapes, different designs. And it doesn't have to be a pattern. It can be any, any design that is a bit too complex to just leave up to a configuration. Now, you'll see we've made a hexagon pattern here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to update this. I'm going to change the dimension to 40 millimeters. I have sped up the video a little bit just because this does take about a minute or so to generate. But imagine trying to redesign this entire thing with a 40 mil cell size. It would be near impossible. And this is one of the cool new tools in 3DEXPERIENCE that's pretty much almost nowhere else within the CAD industry. This is a brand new tool that you guys can start applying to your SolidWorks models as well. In this particular case, we actually did pull in a SolidWorks model as the basis for it. And you'll see there it's updated the design with the smaller cell sizing. That sort of finishes up our webinar. Are there any questions from you guys regarding these tools or anything else we've shown today? You guys can post the questions in the chat. I'm going to give it another few seconds just to make sure there's no questions. If you guys have questions after the fact, you can just email us, and we will publish the recording for this webinar after the fact. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, guys, for attending. We hope you learned something and you found many of these tools interesting. If you'd like to find out more, please contact us. We're more than happy to dive more in depth into these tools. And like I mentioned in the chat, we will be holding hands-on sessions where you can actually get hands-on time using and playing with these tools at our offices. Thank you so much, guys. Cheers.